idea by idea, he takes that and he just exposits it all the way of what are we doing with our eighth note. And so you don't really need somebody to tell you, hey, like, how do I do this, right? You can see, if you follow me from beat 1, the kick is, of course, 1, 3, 1, 3 on beat 2, 1, 2, and 1, 2, and that's that kick pattern. By the time I get to beat 4, it sounds like 1, so it's 1, and then we want to count 1, dot, dot, right? Or 1, 1, 2, dot, dot. That's what it's, sorry. 1 and 2, dot, dot. 1, ga, ga, do, goo, 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 goo. So that's beat 4. Then you go to beat 5. Do, goo, 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 goo. And that wraps around. If you look at beat 5, you see how we've got the and kick on the very end, and then there's one at the very beginning. So he took that idea on beat 4 and he just wrapped it around the measure. So all of our kick is on the offbeat. And then he keeps that going and he adds one more kick on beat 7 where it's boom, 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 boom. You see those 3? And so as we work through that, you just line everything up and you just say like, okay. Because then he starts doing that. If you go down to 9, we go back to a basic kick and we start working on our snare, where the snare is ga-ga, and then it's ga-ga, ga-ga, ga-ga. You see that? On beat 10, it's double hits on the snare. And then on 11, it's the double hit on the snare, and then he reintroduces pattern 2 with the double kick. Do you see how he just keeps building on an idea? Okay? And in that way, we could go all the way through this. But if you look at beat 19 and 18 and 20, in the middle of the beat, do you see that little dot with the squiggle there? Did we talk about what that was last week? That's called an 8th rest, okay? So the reason the 8th rest is there is that so you know that there's nothing there but so it's a placeholder for a note that normally would be there, right here. That's where that note normally is, but he's like, we're not playing there. We're playing on the next and, so there has to be a placeholder in music, and we call that a rest. So I talked about how where you don't play is just as important as where you play. So you introduce, there's a couple different types of rests, and the 8th rest is most used probably in this book because usually you're just trying to say that we're playing on the back side of the beat or the end of the beat, okay? So if you've had some success on your sheet and you want to take and say, okay, I see how to read music. How do I get all the patterns? This book, The Student's Guide to the Drum Set, has everything from that complicated samba beat that I was playing, mambo beats. But the other interesting part is turn one page back in that book. From where we were at on page, yep, there you go. Hi-hat ostinatos. Have anyone ever heard the word ostinato? So an ostinato is a repeating pattern, okay? So I want you to think about that hi-hat that you're playing, right? And this last week we talked about, right? An ostinato is this kind of pattern that happens, that repeats over and over and over. Now, A is what you've been playing. If you just look at A, you guys have already mastered A. A is the hi-hat, and then you see the foot closing there on beat 2 and 4, right? Does that look familiar? So that was what we were playing. If you look at the next one, that implies that the foot is closing on every beat, okay? So that's those beats that you hear that sound like dun, sha, sa, 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 right? So it's on every single beat. And then you have it every offbeat. So we can effectively take your drum beat that you learned, and then we can make it a bunch of different ways if you want me to show you here. And if you just follow along on these top 3 patterns, we go from, that's the beat A, you go to B. You guys have heard that music, right? That was like a dance beat. And so then if you look, instead of closing on 1, 2, 3, 4, so now we're going to close on the end. 1, and 2, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2. Hear that slight change? So we went from 1. So beat D, it's closing your foot on the beat, on that offbeat. You see that? Instead of hitting it every time like this. And it's almost the same feel, but I'm leaning left. Okay? And I can still take the 1 and 2 and play my kick drum all the way through to E. We talked about 16th notes, right? So E, you see where they introduced the, where you're riding that. Ah! And then you can reverse it, and so now, the nice thing for you to see is that, did you see a few of those times it took me a couple seconds in my brain to figure it out? So like I haven't played those patterns in forever. And so like when I was talking to you guys about like, don't get frustrated if you can't get it. Like it takes reading the music, even for me. I've been playing since I was 13. Saturday morning, just got up, right? It's like, gotta get this down. But you see how he takes an idea and he has all of those complications to it. What is that? It's like 16 different complications of patterns that you can just add to 2 and 4 and make your beat crazy, right? It goes from being, that's just a simple drum beat. That's really boring. 2 and 4, that's all there is to drumming. And you're like, oh my word, there's all those complications. And so now think about those complications. And we've only been using our hi-hat. So then what could you do on your ride cymbal and your hi-hat? Right? What if you played one hand on your 16th notes on your ride and one hand on your hi-hat? Right? What if you played one hand on the floor tom and one on the hi-hat when you're going digi, right? Okay, so you can see all just with 2 and 4, you could stay busy for the rest of the year figuring out how your hi-hat works. Isn't that crazy? So if you kind of like this, if you like the idea of drumming and like figuring stuff out, it's a really kind of cool deal where it's a lifetime of learning. You don't ever really get there. And I say that very seriously. The guy who wrote this book, he's like, I'm a pretty bad publisher actually, because most people when they write a book, they'll have all the patterns, maybe for the snare drum. And then they write book 2, all the patterns with the kick drum. And then book 3, all the same stuff, with the hi-hat. He's like, he just put it all into one book. You just have to know how to read it. Okay? So if you have all those hi-hat ostinatos, and you work really hard to get them down with this pattern, well then what about doing them with this pattern? right? It gets very, now I will tell you at some point, it becomes very quick to like get those patterns down, and once you have the pattern, you can implement them, because the muscle memory just starts lining up, right? But you have to go through, so systematically in this book, he takes you down the road to get the right muscle memory at the right time with the right thing. Okay, so 16th notes. 1 E enda, 2 E enda, 3 E enda, 4 E enda, right? Da, 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 da. So sometimes we play that both hands. There's some cats, they do it with one hand, with a double stroke. That kind of, like it depends what the beat's asking you to do and what else you have to do with your other hand. There's a lot of drummers, if you watch them they'll do both hands. And then there's a lot of drummers doing who'll do 16th notes with one hand. I kind of like doing 16 notes with one hand. It frees up my other hand to do other things. But if I had to write a pattern like this, I'm certainly going like left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, okay? So we're gonna just go over today okay, so what else is there? And I could just stop right here and be like, okay guys, you literally have everything you need to practice for a year. Right? Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, how many more techniques do we want to add to these drum beats? Right? However, there's just a couple fun things I want to add, because I don't stop learning the drum beat until I can do a fill and go back into the drum beat. And so for that, you got to know a couple basic fills to play this pattern. So my favorite first fill for students is just simply snare, and we can close that book now I gave you, and I'll get those. We're not going to actually use that. Yeah. My first, and you won't need that piece of paper unless you want to reference it for the drum beat right now, because this is the easiest fill and you will not have a hard time remembering or integrating this. So we're going to be using our floor tom and our snare, and all it is 1/8 notes with your snare and your floor tom. So we're going to hit the snare and the floor tom at the same time. I like for a lot of basic fills, I like to use my kick as well, so that would look like this. I would go boom, 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 right? But when I play that, I like to use what's called the crescendo. Anyone know what a crescendo is?
I'm not sure if I just took a test on it. It's gradually growing faster, it's either gradually growing louder.
It's never gradually
speed.
Nope, it's loud.
It's opposite.
Crescendo. A crescendo in music, you'll see it, and it looks like this. If we were coming into a pattern and they wanted you to get louder, they'll either write this, C-R-E-C, or depending on how long the measure is they want you to do it, it would look like that. So for my purposes here, your snare and your floor tom, we would actually start here, 1/8 notes, and all of these become 1/8 notes. And there would be a floor tom. So we have all these other lines in music. So if something shows up in music down here, that's your low tom. If something shows up in between your snare and your hi-hats, that's your high toms. Okay? So if I did this and then I put in, up here, that would be me. We're going to hit that. Or if I had 2 notes, then I would specifically want you to hit 2 different notes on your toms, right? So this space here and here is reserved for fills or cool things in a beat that are accents, right? Like that mambo I was playing. There would be a mark up here for my tom because the pattern had the tom in it always. So I'm gonna set up this kit for a second so you can hear what it sounds like, because that's probably just best. So if I'm playing that basic drum beat, it's not set up right, and you're just playing along 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then you're like, well, I want to transition. So it's just that. And so if you're playing, you're trying to get that beat down. And can you switch beats? You know, can you switch your beats back and forth while doing that? So when you do that, I kind of do the kick too. Hear that? Now you don't have to. But it sounds way better, and it helps you keep it steady. Okay? Now, you could go. Yeah, so that's going to extend down the drums. And then you could do the same thing individually. Right? But I like that. The first thing that I kind of want people to just get is going. Back into the film. Because you got to just line that up, and the hard part is keeping it steady. So we're going to try that, everybody. So first, let's just play this basic rock beat. Everybody with me. If you gotta start with your hi-hat, do that. We'll go slow. 1, 2, 3. Let's do that a minute. Alright, go ahead and try that beat, nice and slow. Do we need to go back from the beginning? So let's just bring everyone, let's warm everyone up right here. Ready? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and so the first one is your kick, remember? So, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and on the snare and the floor tom. 1 and 2 and 3 and floor tom snare. Floor tom snare, floor tom snare. So it's going to be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and boom, 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 boom. Okay? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You can do either one. When I do it, I like the lowest sound because it just rumbles, you know? We're going for like this, feel it in your chest kind of a thing, right? Like, whoa! That's the kind of, when I'm doing this, and I still use this, I used it last week. I'm like, because it's just like, oh my gosh, that's just a wall of sound coming at you. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so 1. And what I want you to do while we're doing this together is I want you to pick a volume. We're going to go a little quieter and then we're going to build it. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and sounds terrible. Keep hitting it. There we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now we're going to start again. When I get to 4, I want you to start, but I want you to crescendo. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. But you need a crescendo over only 4 beats. You crescendoed over 8 beats. Okay? So it's just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and boom! Got it. Okay? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. All right. Well, again, quieter, and then build that thing. You only have 4 beats, so here's part of it. You have to kind of know. All right. So to crescendo, you have to start smaller, right? But you really only want the volume so high, because if we start loud, then the only place we have to go is really loud. Well, maybe we don't want to be really loud. Maybe you're playing in a quiet little, maybe you're playing for your school and they're like, well, we got to keep the volume down, but you've already started at forte. And now you have to go fortissimo. You know that word, huh? Nice. So you kind of have to start smaller. So we're going to try to go from like piano, or pianissimo even, up to forte. Okay, in only 4 beats. So it's just going to be like boom, 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 boom. Okay? Almost pretend that you're playing that rock beat and you start that and almost nobody can hear you, but then they really can hear you. Okay, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and kind of 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we're gonna do that again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? You guys you're really timid, I normally have to tell people, stop hitting the drums so hard. Again, let's see you do it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's try it quieter. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now here's the thing with fills. People generally, when you're beginners or adults or whatever, when you go into a fill, you lose your rhythm. You get so, any fill people are doing, they stop keeping that time metronome, right? And then they just run away with the beat, and then the beat's faster. So having a metronome, if you have a phone, get the metronome in your ear. So, and that's kind of why I like that kick hitting. So everybody go ahead and hit their floor tom with me. No, I'm sorry, kick drum. Golly. Keep that rhythm. Everyone line that kick drum up. I don't hear it. I'm not convinced. Alright, stop. I want the ball of your foot on the middle of your pedal if you can. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Louder. Somebody's rushing. Louder, and this is another challenge with drumming. A lot of times when you get louder, you speed up. Stop. Be on my drum beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now louder. Now on beat 1, we're going to crescendo the snare and the floor. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. So now you know what it feels like. So trying to do that and keep it steady, you already picturing how hard that is? Metronomes, people, metronomes. So one of the hardest things, even with the most basic fill and everything's lined up, is to try to keep people together. That's one of the challenges of drumming. So it's not can you learn to drum? Can you line everything up? It's can you be disciplined enough to get a metronome on or practice to music And when you're doing what you're gonna do, not speed up and mess it up for the band. Because I mean, the number of musicians who play but don't actually understand that their time is terrible. You know, there's guitarists out there strumming and they think the drummer's terrible because they feel like he's offbeat, and the drummer thinks that the guitarist is terrible because he thinks they're offbeat, and everybody thinks everybody else is terrible because they're offbeat, and they're all right. They're all probably offbeat at a different time, right? So lining it up with a metronome, I don't know if you've ever taken piano lessons, but a lot of times when you're taking piano lessons, eventually they get that metronome out and they make you play to a metronome. When I was drumming, and again, this was probably like, oh man. So I started when I was 13, and then, let's see, I must have been 35 or 32 or somewhere in there. And keep in mind, I'm playing for bands, everything's great, there's no problems. I have a friend, he was a worship leader, and he wanted to use something called click tracks. Click tracks, you just imagine putting something in your ear and it's doing what I just did the whole time. Click, 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 click in your ear. And then it would say, like there's a voice that would say chorus, and so then you know the chorus is coming. So it'd be like chorus, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're playing, and be like, bridge, 1, so then you know the bridge. So everybody has the click track in their ear, okay? So everybody played together up to that point, totally fine. Everybody gets click tracks in their ears, and everybody has a hard time playing together. Now, why do you think that is? It's because everybody, like, who would rush, right, if your speed was off, then everybody kind of followed. Like, if you were rushing, then I would hear you rush, and I'd follow you. Or if I was slowing down, you would follow me, or blah, blah, right? But when suddenly there's perfection in your ear, nobody's used to perfection, and everybody struggled. And it probably took 3 months for everybody to have a click in their ear and actually play together. Once that was a part of our system, I would be listening to music in here in the store, just randomly listening to music. Like, they slowed down on an album. Like, they sped up. Usually older recordings before they were using a metronome. You could actually feel it. So some people come in here and they say, well, I have terrible rhythm. Rhythm is learned. Okay, it's not natural. Now, some people have natural rhythm, but I'm talking about a precise, keep the beat the same rhythm. Okay, you have to learn it. I have there's a guy that I know who slept with a metronome in his ear. They sell this little earbud, and he just slept with tick, 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 and like it is kind of insane. And he had perfect beat, like he could keep it together. It was pretty amazing. So it's a discipline, just like lining everything up together. So what I would say is, I kind of use music for that, because most modern tracks, they're recorded to a metronome. So if you're playing along with your favorite music, that's already there. And then if you use that beat, boom, 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 and you feel yourself rush, like, oh crap, I was rushing, I need to get that back on. So if you're in school drumming or whatever, if you're trying to play, you kind of have to use a metronome for the precision of a drum solo. Like, you can't be screwing around. And then you can use it to make sure that, can I speed up just a little bit more with the same precision? Can I speed up just a little bit more with the same precision? So again, this isn't like a sales clinic for a metronome. I'm just trying to tell you the hardest part about drumming is to learn that drum beat, and then take that beat that you just learned and try to play them back to back, and then back it into the drum beat and have the same drum beat. It's very difficult when you're beginning. So that's why when I'm drumming, we might play this pattern that we had, boom, ga, boom, boom, ga, boom, ga, boom, boom, ga. But when I go into that pattern of the do, 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 I'm 4 on the floor, right? Because here's your pattern, do, ga, boom, boom, just to keep myself grounded so I don't get too excited while I'm building a crescendo, right? Because did you feel when you're building the crescendo, you kind of get a little bit like, That's what speeds you up, okay? So, that is a really important lesson to learn, is that when you're trying to integrate that, it's just as important to be able to go from your drum beat into something else and back. And so like use that, like, and if you don't have a drum set and you're just at home going to your music, see that? It's the same thing. I've got to stay steady, and if I can do this, okay, that drum beat, it's a really great thing. So I would make sure I could do that fill from here to here, right? Or on your music from the very top beat to the beat 5, or from the very top beat to beat 7. However, what I will tell you about those example drum beats I gave you is they're not as systematic as Dr. Schaefer's book, right? So what I was doing when I was learning more complicated drum beats in the book, I would just say like, okay, I'm going to go from beat A to beat B. There's a slight variation. I want to make sure I can do it right. Okay? All right. The last thing, did anybody like work on double strokes from last week? Yeah, let me see your hi-hat. Everybody play eighth notes on the hi-hat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and play it like you mean it. Play it like it's not Saturday at 8:30 a.m. Try to play it only using your wrist on the downbeat. Make that stick bounce. Alright, you guys can stop. We got some work to do. Nobody's doing it correctly, so nobody has to feel bad. Alright, so let me see that stick. Now I want to remind all of you, if I hold the stick totally wrong, it bounces, okay? So if I was going like this, right, like you kind of got it, but it doesn't come back with the power I need it to come back to, or the precision. It's the underneath that's doing that. So you just have to hold that and get it. So that's a whole separate exercise, okay? Now, one way to practice that, you guys all have your sheets, right? But we don't have any pens. All right, pens. So we're going to write on the bottom of the sheet, and I just want to write, oh, gotta get your sheet. So that's what we're looking at right now. Here's what you're going to write. You can flip it over It's easier. You can draw that, and if you want to add, just for effect, so you know the timing that we're going for, it's technically 16th notes that are counted 1 E and 2 E. And so now I've got a lot of scribbles there. You can make that as complicated as you want. It depends if you need that or not. This is called a paradiddle. A paradiddle sounds like it sounds. Da 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 da. Paradiddle, 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 paradiddle. The reason I'm showing you, like, this is one of the rudiments of drumming. The reason I'm showing it to you is because it uses a double stroke. It forces you to get off of your hi-hat, get onto your snare, and try to get that bounce down. Okay? Try to do it both with one hand. So the left hand, so we're going to go left, right, left, left. Everybody follow me? Left, right, left, left. Left, right, left, left. Left, right, left, left. Left, right, left, left. Left, right, left, right, left, left. Left, right, left, left. Okay, now, the whole thing is, we're going to go the whole thing now. Left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right. Left, right, left, left, right, left. Left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right. Left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right. Okay, good. Now, we're going to complicate it. When you see this mark, that's an accent. That means we hit it harder and the rest are quieter. A real paradiddle is like this. Paradiddle, 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 paradiddle. So that accent is on the beat. So we're 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. So that's pretty fast, right? And I'm going really slow. So think about how fast this beat is. We have to go slow to get it fast. So we're going to go left, right, left, left. I want you to just think about that accent. Left, right, ready, go. Left, right, Yep. Good. Okay, so now, once it's fast enough, really this becomes a double stroke. At the speed we're doing it, pretty hard to do a double stroke at that speed, right? So that becomes ga-ga, right? Ga-ga, it's one hit. And so, when we're taking this to the how it really is, right? I'm emphasizing the height of my stick for the accent. Everything else is lower. Okay, and it becomes a very fast 1 into 2 into 1 into 2 into 1 into 2 into 1 into 2. Now, this is kind of cool. So I just showed you a very, very simple drum beat for a fill. And I also showed you a super complicated one that I do not expect you to play. But a lot of jazz musicians and funk and rock, they use this on their toms. They might take, so go ahead and put your, keep your snare hand on your snare. You know, your right hand is on your snare. Your left hand, I want you to bring that up to your top tom. Okay? So, I'm sorry, yeah, left on the snare. I messed up. Left hand on your snare, right hand up on your top tom. So as an example, they would do left, everybody on left. Yes, do it again. Now, instead of, when you get to this side, go to that tom. Okay, so that wasn't quite right, but you see what I'm saying though? So that's a very, very, very famous thing they would do with 16th notes. And it ends up sounding really, really cool. And a lot of times jazz drummers back in the day would only have the top and the bottom, you know? Just mix it up. Combination works. If I'm just playing, right, it works. Now here's the other thing that works. If you take that pattern and I just play it left, right, left, right, left, right, okay? That is a paradiddle on a drum set, and it sounds super rad. Or it's like crazy, okay? Or like from like super basic to super complicated to show you the power of one simple rudiment when like taken all the way out. No different than this kick and the snare pattern, when taken all the way out with those hi-hat patterns, can get super complicated very quickly. So it's a matter of having it down, right? That didn't come overnight. But it's a really cool way to sound super rad. And remember, I think the last lesson I had said some of the things that sound really complicated really aren't. Those are some of the things your favorite drummers are doing. They're not that complicated once you have the muscle memory down. It sounds like, holy buckets. It's like, no, he was just playing paradiddles, which is like the third rudiment or fourth rudiment in drumming. You literally, junior high kids need to know how to play that if they're in band. So it starts slow, and the important part, and why I'm showing it to you, is to give you something kind of intriguing to practice that has a double stroke. Because slowly in school, it does look like single, 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 single. But at a certain speed, you have to do a double. And you really have to do the double so it sounds right. And I want you to have the double down in both hands. Because the double, right, that's on the hi-hat, it can be on your ride, it can be on your toms, and it adds that da-da, 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 got it, got it, got it, got it, and it sounds really, really cool. And you have to discipline yourself to go accent, ba, da, da, got, okay, so that accent is really important. That's another fill. You could like, oh, I think I have that beat down and I've got his first fill down. I want something else to do. Well, try to throw 4 of those in there. Ba da 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 ba, right? Which would simply be what you just did. You could just start with snare, tom, snare, snare, tom, snare, tom, tom, snare, tom, snare, snare, tom, snare. And then eventually we just mix it up a little bit once we've got the control of our hands. Okay. So that gets into the 8th notes. Again, metronome, ga da da da, ga da da da, ga da da da, ga da da, right? And we speed it up. So that's the single stroke, rhythm at 1, double stroke, rhythm at 2, paradiddle, 3. Now that's a very quickly abbreviated lesson on it. Ideally, the double stroke gets integrated into your hi-hat. Ideally, all of the beats that I showed you this morning here get integrated into your playing, and then you can work on further complicated drum beats, because eventually we get to patterns that look like this. Now the hi-hat's been left out, so you can imagine your own hi-hat pattern. It's a lot of dots, isn't it? If you take pattern 20, ga 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 ga, and what that is on beat 20, I'm going to pat my finger there. I'm going to say paradiddle. Do you see that? Paradiddle. You see it? And it's between the snare and the kick. See that? That figure right below my finger, see that? Do, ga, do, do. That's the snare and the kick. So everybody do this. If this is your snare, left is snare, right is kick. 1, 2, 3, 4, snare, kick, snare, snare, kick, snare, kick, kick. Now, imagine you're playing your hi-hat at the exact same time. We're not going to do that right now, right? But you just did the pattern, didn't you? That's like really far in the book. Now, I know that if we just stopped right now and we had another 30 minutes, I could line you all, we would 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and right? We would go so, and then you'd have it. It's not magic, okay? So hopefully you have a couple more tools to like unravel this equation and go home and practice those. So that is the end of our time today. So you got like plenty to practice,